Okay, let's jump straight into this explainer because we're looking at a truly terrifying historical case today. We are diving into a deeply disturbing incident from a British-era heritage hotel in Kolkata called the Royal Crescent. And honestly, Kolkata is literally the perfect setting for a story like this. It's this incredible city where stunning, crumbling colonial architecture meets deeply rooted ancient history. The atmosphere there is dense, it's often heavy with rain, and it is just layered with centuries of secrets. So what we're exploring today? Well, it isn't just your standard campfire ghost story. No, it's a complex, incredibly dark sequence of events that completely blurs the lines between a cold case crime, historical cults, and the paranormal. Right off the bat, I want to start with this ominous diary entry. Until the final ARPAN is complete, they will keep returning. The police who eventually found this chilling sentence had absolutely no idea what the word ARPAN meant at first. But reading it decades after it was written, it immediately sets this incredibly suspenseful, horrifying tone for what we're about to unpack. It's a dark promise of violence, an ancient, historical threat that somehow woke up to become a very real modern-day nightmare. So, to understand exactly how this historical threat resurfaced, we have to introduce our protagonist. Meet Rupa. She's a 26-year-old housekeeper who had just started a brand new job working the late shifts at the Royal Crescent. And I really want you to imagine the setting she was walking into every single night. We're talking incredibly long, dimly lit corridors, heavy antique wooden stairs that creak underfoot, and walls lined with these massive, imposing old portraits whose eyes literally seem to follow you in the dark. It is the absolute perfect atmospheric pressure cooker for the terror she's about to experience. Which really leads us to ask, what actually happens when a 70-year-old secret wakes up? Well, Rupa was working a totally routine night shift. She was just making her quiet rounds on the second floor when she heard something deeply unsettling coming from inside one of the honeymoon suites. And it wasn't just a bump in the night. It was this sickening scrape. Imagine the sound of dead weight being dragged heavily against hardwood floorboards. She knocked, calling out for room service, but she was met with nothing but a suffocating dead silence. Now, let's break down the sheer horror of this initial crime scene. According to the official hotel records, this specific honeymoon suite was supposed to be completely empty. So, confused and obviously a bit frightened, Rupa swiped her master keycard and slowly pushed the heavy door open. Right in the middle of the bedroom, suspended in midair, was a headless body. Its arms and legs were tightly bound with heavy rope to the four massive wooden posts of the bed. Blood was actively dripping from the severed neck, and the entire body swayed slowly in the air like some gruesome, incomplete pendulum. Rupa ran out screaming, instantly alerting the night staff and calling the authorities. The police arrived, were obviously horrified, and they launched an immediate investigation into the murder. But for Rupa, the nightmare was just escalating. This is where the psychological terror really began to take hold. One night, while trying to sleep in her isolated staff quarters, she woke up at exactly 3 a.m. Out in the corridor, she heard that exact same phantom dragging sound, scraping slowly across the floor until it stopped right outside her door. Then came 3 loud, deliberate knocks. Thack, thack, thack. When a terrified Rupa looked through the small gap under her door, she saw feet, but they were facing completely backwards. It was as if the person was looking the other way, which is a classic, terrifying hallmark of South Asian folklore. The reversed footsteps slowly dragged away into the dark. Terrified, she told hotel management, but they completely dismissed her claims. They told her she was just suffering from trauma and stress, leaving her entirely isolated in her terror. But the evidence of something far more sinister was mounting, and she definitely wasn't crazy. Just 2 days later, while cleaning out an abandoned, dusty storage room deep inside the hotel, Rupa uncovered a hidden wooden box. The carvings on the outside were highly specific and deeply unsettling, a circle with an eye inside it surrounded entirely by human handprints. When she opened it, she found old, sepia-tone photographs with curled edges from a bygone era. And the contrast in the images was chilling. One photo showed a group of well-dressed men in sharp 1930s suits, but they were wearing strange black masks. And right in the center of this wealthy-looking group, suspended in the air with her limbs bound, was a headless woman. When she flips the photograph over, it had a single word written in faded ink on the back. ARPAN. This translates to sacrifice. Now, this discovery completely changes everything. It takes the story from a terrifying, unexplained ghost story and grounds it firmly into organized, historical, occult violence.
It proved the paranormal events Rupa was experiencing were tied to a very specific, terrifyingly real ritualistic practice. She immediately handed this box and the photos over to the police, adding a completely new, deeply disturbing layer to their murder investigation.
The investigation soon uncovered a dark historical timeline buried beneath the very floorboards of the hotel. Digging much deeper into the property's blueprints, the police discovered a British-era basement that had been permanently sealed off behind brick and mortar since 1941. They broke the heavy door down and walked into a literal nightmare. In the damp dark, they found a stone altar, those exact same strange eye and hand symbols carved deep into the stone walls, and scattered human bones that forensic experts would later date back 70 to 80 years. And crucially, sitting right on that altar, they found an old, decaying diary. It detailed how back in 1931, a secret society of wealthy, powerful men was formed right there in the dark underbelly of the city.
The diary contained chillingly methodical instructions for the Arpin ritual. The steps were laid out so clinically. First, choose a female victim. Second, bind her hands and feet. Third, suspend her in the air. And finally, sever the head. The cold, straightforward tone of these written words stands in this deep, nauseating contrast to the morbid reality of the atrocities these men were actually committing in that basement. And remember that final warning in the diary we looked at earlier? They will keep returning until the final Arpin is complete.
Terrified beyond belief that this ancient ritual was somehow still active and actively targeting her, Rupa decided she was going to quit and leave the city the very next morning. But that night, as she walked the long, empty corridor back to her room, the air suddenly grew freezing cold. She felt an intense, threatening presence all around her. She turned towards her door and was suddenly confronted by 5 men blocking her path. They were wearing the exact same black clothes and heavy masks from the 1931 photograph. They stood in suffocating silence. And worse, the horrific smell of decay hit her before she even realized what she was looking at. Each of the men was holding a rotting, severed female head.
She ran, heart pounding, breath catching in her throat. Rupa bolted blindly through the maze of the hotel, feeling completely isolated as the masked men slowly, silently pursued her in the dark. In sheer, blinding panic, she ducked into the closest empty room. She slammed the door and locked it from the inside. She grabbed the room phone, her hands shaking uncontrollably, and made a frantic call to the police, begging them to save her. But as she slammed the receiver down, a horrifying realization washed over her. She looked up at the giant 4-poster bed. She had locked herself inside the exact same honeymoon suite where she had discovered the first headless body. The police rushed to the hotel immediately, sirens blaring through the Kolkata night, but they were too late. When they finally broke down the heavy oak door of the honeymoon suite, they were greeted by a chilling message smeared in fresh blood across the expensive wallpaper: Antim Arpin, the final sacrifice. The absolute most chilling part of the investigation was that Rupa's end perfectly mirrored the original crime scene. The heavy door had been deadbolted from the inside, yet there, right in the middle of the room, Rupa's body was suspended like a pendulum. Her limbs were bound to the 4 corners of the bed, and her head was entirely missing. It left the authorities completely baffled. There was absolutely zero logical or physical explanation as to how 5 killers got in, committed this atrocity, and vanished out of a locked room. Following this horrific event, the police permanently sealed the entire hotel. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why do stories of locked room, ritualistic horrors like this stay with us so deeply, embedding themselves into our cultural consciousness? Well, it's stories exactly like this Royal Crescent lore that inspire the darkest, most fascinating corners of modern fiction. Take Z5's psychological thriller series, Brown, for example. Just like our true crime lore today, the show is set against the incredibly gritty, atmospheric backdrop of Kolkata. The series features Karisma Kapoor playing Rita Brown, who is this world-weary, rugged detective forced to track down a serial killer. And this killer doesn't just murder. They use highly specific, gruesome, ritualistic methods. The thematic parallels here between a cold, methodical 1931 secret society executing black magic sacrifices and the ruthless, ritualistic killer in Brown are absolutely striking. It brings up a really compelling question. Why are we so universally fascinated by the dark psychology behind ritualistic murders? Whether we're analyzing the historical lore of a haunted heritage hotel or binge-watching a gripping thriller like Brown, the real hook isn't just figuring out who the killer is. It's diving into why they're doing it. These narratives tap into the most complex human elements.
In Brown, we see Charisma Kapoor's detective battling her own severe internal demons, things like addiction, deep guilt, and unresolved trauma, while simultaneously having to fight literal, ritualistic monsters in the real world. That intense contrast between personal brokenness and ancient, brutal belief systems operating in the shadows of the modern world, that is exactly what keeps us glued to the screen.
As for the Royal Crescent, the police never found those 5 masked men, nor any further concrete evidence of the surviving cult. Eventually, after enough time had passed, the property was purchased, heavily renovated, and reopened under a completely different name. But the locals in Kolkata certainly haven't forgotten the blood soaked into those floorboards. They say the spirit of a headless woman still wanders those long, dark corridors late at night, endlessly searching for peace. So, the next time you stay in a beautiful historic hotel, you might just find yourself asking, what exactly is hiding behind that locked door down the hall? Until next time, keep questioning the history around you.